The heart tree listened. Its white bark rose like bone from the black, damp earth of Winterfell's godswood. Branches spread in a canopy of red leaves that whispered to one another in the slow language of sap and memory. The carved face in the trunk watched the world with eyes of congealed crimson. Sap tears dried along the grooves of its cheeks. Snow clung in the creases of its roots, melting in thin rivulets that ran like pale veins into the pool below. Bran Stark sat in his chair beneath the tree, wrapped in a cloak of gray and white wolf fur, his hands lying still upon his lap. He did not feel the cold. The wind slid its fingers through his hair, but his skin was only a distant shore to him now. The breath steaming from his lips might have belonged to someone else. He watched the reflection of the heart tree in the pool, white trunk, red leaves, a face that was not quite the same as the one carved into the bark. In the water's reflection, the eyes seemed deeper, almost alive, as if some immense presence peered back at him from the other side of the world. Around him, Winterfell moved as it always had. Somewhere beyond the wall of trees, boots rang on stone. A stable boy cursed at a stubborn mule. The clang of steel on steel floated faintly from the yard where men trained with sword and spear beneath the watchful eyes of their captains. The castle breathed, and with it breathed the north. Bran let the sounds wash over him like the sigh of a distant tide. "Your Grace." The voice came as if from far away, tugging him back toward the small, frail body beneath the tree. Bran blinked, and his eyes focused on the man standing beside his chair. Roderick, he remembered after a heartbeat. No Lewin. No Maester Robin, grown old before his time, his chain glinting against the gray wool of his robes. The years blurred sometimes. "Forgive me," Bran said, his own voice sounding thin, reedy. "I was listening." The Maester bowed his head. "There are ravens from the south. The Queen in King's Landing writes again, and the Lord Protector of the Trident presses for judgment on the river disputes. The small council awaits your word." Bran looked past him, through him into the black mirror of the pool. In its depths, he saw snow-covered fields and a burning sky. He saw a dragon's shadow pass over a broken tower. He saw a boy of 7 tumbling from a high window, arms flailing in empty air. He felt again, for the briefest instant, the vertigo and the screaming rush of wind and the sudden shattering dark. "Tell them I will consider," Bran said softly. "I will send my answer by nightfall." The Maester hesitated. In that small pause, Bran heard fear. No, not fear, unease. An animal's restless awareness at the scent of something it does not understand. "Your Grace," the Maester said carefully, "they say you have not left the Godswood in 3 days. The Lords. Some whisper that the realm needs a king who walks its halls." Bran turned his head with slow effort and regarded the man. Robin's face was lined like old parchment. His eyes had once been bright with curiosity and skepticism both. Now patience had carved its own grooves beside them. "Do they also say," Bran asked, "that the realm still stands?" The Maester flushed. "Of course, Your Grace. Forgive me. Only, this burden is heavy. We wonder, sometimes, whether you ought not share it." "I am sharing it," Bran said. "More than they know." He looked back to the tree, to the red leaves stirring overhead. The wind that moved them was not the same wind that chilled Robin's cheeks and ruffled his thinning hair. The Weirwood leaves shivered to the currents of something older, deeper. "Leave me now," Bran said. "I will attend to the ravens when I return." "When you return?" Robin echoed. Bran's lips twitched. It might once have become a smile. Now it was only an echo of the boy he had been. "From where I'm going," he said. Robin bowed deeply then, the chain at his throat clinking. "As you command, Your Grace." His footsteps retreated through the snow, fading into the winter woods. The Godswood fell silent save for the soft exhalation of the wind and the slow, steady drip of melting snow into the pool. Bran drew in a breath. He let it go. His fingers twitched once against the arms of his chair, and then went still. His eyes lifted to the bleeding red canopy above. He fell upward. For a moment there was the familiar lurch, the sensation of leaving his own flesh behind like an old cloak shrugged from his shoulders. The weight of his lame legs, the ache in his back, the thinness of his breath. These were pebbles dropped beside the vast river of what he was becoming. His vision blurred, then sharpened, and the godswood stretched around him not as a circle of trees but as the hub of a great web. Each branch of the heart tree was a path. Each leaf was an eye. Roots sank through earth and stone and deeper still, weaving with the roots of other trees to make a net that cradled all of Westeros in its patient, living grasp. Snow-blanketed pines on a northern hill whispered to twisted oaks beside a southern river, and all their murmurs flowed along the same underground veins, gathering, entwining. Bran slipped into that current. The world fractured into fragments. He was the raven winging over the battlements. He was the dire wolf padding silent through the godswood. He was the black bark drinking meltwater and remembering the blood that had once soaked the soil. His awareness expanded, blossoming outward like frost patterns on winter glass. He saw the wall, ancient and silent, its great white face pocked with lines of black where men trudged along the top. He saw the ruins of Harrenhal, where crows nested in the scorched, skeletal towers left by dragonflame. He saw the green fields of the Reach, the sunburned stones of Dorne, the muddy, crowded streets of King's Landing. He saw himself, younger, clinging to a crenel as his mother shouted his name. He felt the roughness of the stone beneath his hands, the thrill of height, the certainty that nothing truly bad could ever happen to him, because his father was Eddard Stark and Winterfell would always stand. He saw the moment that certainty died. In a chamber that no longer existed, he saw Jaime Lannister's hand on his shoulder, felt the sudden push, the awful lightness. He watched his own small body fall and fall, limbs pinwheeling. Somewhere, he heard his own scream, and somewhere he heard the soft, sorrowful rush of the leaves as the heart trees bore silent witness. He had watched this memory before because it was his, but now the edges of it shimmered. The scene hung before him like a tapestry half-woven, threads trailing loose, waiting for the hand that would choose how to knot them. Time, Bran thought, was not a straight road. The three-eyed raven had tried to teach him that long ago, in the cave of roots and bones beyond the wall. The ink is dry, the old man had said, sitting half-swallowed by the tree. You can watch, but you cannot change. Bran understood now that this had been a lie, or perhaps only a half-truth, given by a tired mind that no longer trusted itself with the power it commanded. The ink was never truly dry. It still gleamed wet upon the page, if one looked closely enough. He drifted away from the memory of his fall, down through the roots. They tangled him, caught him, pulled him deeper. Each knot was a moment. Each twist was a choice made or unmade. If he strained, he could feel currents he had only brushed in passing before now pressing at him in earnest. Possibilities, paths unrealized. In the dark beneath the world, a door waited. He had sensed it before, faintly, like a knot in the wood that his fingers skated over but did not prod. This time he reached for it. The door was not a thing of wood or stone. It was a pattern, a particular interlacing of roots, a convergence where the past and future braided so tightly that the bark itself seemed to hum. When Bran's awareness brushed against it, the hum became a whisper, and the whisper became a voice. Not words, not in the way that men spoke, but something older. Choose. The word rippled through him in the rustle of leaves, the trickle of sap. It came in the creak of an ancient bough under winter snow and in the shiver of green shoots pushing up through thawing earth. Choose, little leaf. Bran hesitated. He thought of Winterfell as it had been, a home full of noise and warmth, his father's low voice in the hall, Arya's shrill laughter. He thought of Winterfell as it was now, rebuilt and made whole, banners snapping above the walls, yet changed forever by the blood spilled within its stones. His father's bones lay beneath the crypt. His mother's did not. Robb's did not. The red wedding had taken those. He thought of the long night and of the pale blue eyes of the dead. He thought of Arya's face streaked with ash as she rode through streets choked with the charred bodies of strangers. of a girl who had sailed west because she could no longer bear the ghost of smoke. He thought of dragons screaming over a burning city, of bells that rang and rang until they were lost beneath the roar of fire. What if? The two words had haunted him as much as any vision. What if his father had never ridden south? What if Jon's parentage had been known from the first? What if the children of the forest had never made the others? What if the doom had spared Valyria, or the Undulls had never crossed the sea, or the first Stark to kneel to Aegon had chosen war instead? The paths of all those what-ifs threaded through the roots like veins of silver in dark rock. Until now, he had only watched them from afar, careful not to touch. He had been afraid of shattering something delicate, of tugging a single thread and unraveling the whole tapestry of the world. He was not certain he was afraid anymore. The realm still bled from wounds it did not understand. Old wrongs festered beneath a thin crust of peace. The north looked to him with hope and with wariness both. The south looked with suspicion. Men argued over taxes and tithes while fields in the riverlands lay full of unburied bones. He had seen what men did when their memories were all they had. They clung to them like drowning sailors to wreckage, building their futures from old hate and older hurt. What if the memories themselves could be changed? Choose, the Weirwoods whispered again. Or perhaps it was his own mind speaking with the forest's voice. The distinction had grown thin. If he did nothing, history would continue as it had, stumbling forward on broken legs, dragging behind it a cart piled with the dead. If he chose, he would be not only a king, but the author of kings and beggars alike. Not only a watcher, but the hand that set the ink to parchment. Who was he to take that for himself? Who else was there? He felt the weight of his own name then. Brandon Stark. There had been many Brandons, so many they blurred together, all stubborn and proud and bound to Winterfell in blood and bone and duty. Brandon the builder, who had raised the wall and Winterfell both. Brandon the shipwright, who had sailed west and never returned. Brandon his uncle, whose bones had come back in a box because he had ridden too early and too hot to his own doom. The Starks had always stood at the crossing of things. North and south, old gods and new, ice and fire. It seemed fitting that a Brandon should stand at the crossing of time itself. Bran reached. He pressed his will toward the pattern that was the door. The roots around it stiffened, then shuddered, like muscles cramped by sudden strain. For a moment nothing happened. Then something gave. The world broke. Not in a sound, but in an absence of sound. All the murmurs of leaf and water dropped away. The birds' cries cut off mid-screech. Winterfell vanished. The pool beneath the heart tea. Ree became an eye-opening. The black water dilating until the godswood and the castle and the entire width of the sky fell into it. Bran fell with them. He did not fall alone. Others were caught in the undertow of the thing he had done. Faces flashing past him like leaves whirled in a storm. His father's somber gray eyes, full of quiet sorrow. His mother's fierce, worried gaze. Robb laughing, wind in his hair at the head of a charge. Sansa singing with her eyes closed. Arya scowling over a wooden sword. Jon standing on the wall, cloak snapping behind him in the cold wind, looking north as if some part of him belonged there and always would. They were pulled into the dark, into the place beneath places, where the roots of the world knotted into a single incomprehensible mass. The pressure on Bran's awareness became almost unbearable. It felt as if the universe had clenched its fists around him. Then the pressure changed. It became fingers turning pages. Memories unspooled. Not only Bran's, but everyone's. He saw them all at once, layered atop one another like leaves pressed into a maester's book. A woman in labor on a bed that smelled of blood and lilies. A man with dark hair and a sad smile bending over her, whispering words in a language that had not been spoken in Westeros for hundreds of years. A sword laid at the foot of the bed, its blade long and pale as ice. "Ned?" Lyanna Stark gasped, and blood bubbled at the corner of her mouth. "Promise me." And then the scene flickered, quivered, like a candle flame in a sudden gust. Another layer. A king on a throne of molten blades, his beard flecked with gray, his hand clenching around the pommel of a warhammer. Robert Baratheon roared with laughter as he watched two knights break lances in the yard below, oblivious to the spider at his elbow and the lioness in his bedchamber. Another layer. Dragons wheeling over a city of black spires, their shadows cutting across a river of molten rock. Valyria, at the height of its power, its mages walking the glowing streets and tracing sigils in the air. In the distance, a mountain smoked and grumbled, ignored. Another. A grove of weirwoods, their faces sharper, their eyes narrower, as children of the forest danced around them in a circle, their voices chiming like water on stone. In the center of the grove, a man knelt, his skin dark as rich earth, his eyes filled with terror as a shard of dragonglass was pushed into his chest. Another, the first Stark, sword in hand, standing on a hill of freshly heaped stones as he raised a castle of timber and earth in the shadow of the wall he had helped to raise. He watched the northern sky, as if expecting something to come crawling down from the ice. Every moment, every choice, every death, every birth. It was all here, bound into the roots, recorded in the slow, patient script of sap and stone. The pages kept turning. He saw a boy named Ares laughing with his cousin in the Red Keep Gardens, his hair only beginning to silver. He saw a man named Ares screaming as wildfire consumed him upon his own throne. He saw, in 1,000 variations, the point at which a mind turned to madness. A whispered betrayal, a fearful prophecy, a single sleepless night when paranoia sank its teeth into a fragile heart. He saw Rhaegar with a harp in his hands, singing to a small audience. Sometimes Lyanna was there, sometimes not. Sometimes Elia watched him with soft, adoring eyes. Sometimes she did not live long enough to see him crowned with roses. He saw countless ways a man could turn left instead of right, speak instead of staying silent, reach for a hand instead of a sword. Each forking made another thread. The tapestry was so thick with them that light barely filtered through. Bran realized, with a slow, dawning horror, that he had not opened a single door. He had flung wide every door that had ever been and ever could be. The Weirwood Network, as the children had called it in their secret tongue, was not merely a thing of roots and bark. It was an archive of causality, and now it waited for him to touch it. He understood, pluck out a moment like a leaf, crush it between his fingers, let its dust scatter. Or he could press a new leaf into place, altering the pattern. The tree would adjust. The world would rewrite itself. There would be consequences, of course. Ripples, perhaps tsunamis, but the power itself was real. He realized, too, that he was not the first to stand here. Far beneath the oldest groves, beyond even the memories of the children, there lay strange hollows in the tangle. Places where something had been excised. Cavities in time where an event had once been but was no more. Someone before him had plucked. Someone before him had chosen. He felt the imprint of that previous hand in the shape of the world he knew. The pact between the first men and the children, signed in blood and sap at the Isle of Faces. The raising of the wall. The doom that had shattered Valyria. The fall of the dragons from the sky. Whoever had done this had not done so lightly. Bran floated in that vastness, small as a snowflake and as heavy as a mountain. A face formed in the roots before him, not the stylized, carved faces of the heart trees that men made, but a blend of many, narrow eyes, deep-set, a broken nose, a long white mustache that trailed like lichen. One eye was missing. The socket was a black hollow in which something flickered, green and pale. Bloodraven, Bran said. The name felt right, though he knew that whatever this was, it was not entirely the man who had once worn that name. It was an echo, a pattern, a residuum burned into the wood by centuries of watching. Brandon, the root-face replied. The voice was like the creak of an ancient branch in a storm. Little lord, little king, little god. Bran remembered the old man in the cave, pale and frail, with 1,000 roots burrowed through his body. He remembered the weight of that gaze, the slow, careful words. You told me the ink was dry, Bran said. Bloodraven's wooden lips pulled back in something like a smile. "Did you believe me?" "I believed you believed it," Bran answered. A rustling passed through the surrounding roots, as if some unseen audience shifted to listen. "I told you what I had to," the old presence said. "You were not ready. Even now, I do not know if you are." "I opened it." Bran looked around. "Is it possible to close it again?" Bloodraven's laugh was the snapping of twigs. "That is not how doors work, Brandon. Once you have seen the other side, you cannot pretend the room does not exist." "So I must act," Bran said slowly, "or choose not to act, and that is acting too." Roots coiled and uncoiled, the closest thing this place had to a shrug. "You stand at the heart of what was and what might be. The Weirwoods remember, and in remembering they shape. Memory is the skeleton of the world. Change the bones, and the flesh must follow." "Why didn't you do it?" Bran demanded. If you could have stopped the doom or Ares or all of it, why didn't you?" He felt an old, weary amusement drift through the wood. "Who says I didn't?" Bloodraven murmured. "Do you know how the world was before I touched it? Before others touched it before me? Perhaps you were to be born in a world drowned centuries ago. Perhaps you were never to be born at all. Every choice prevents another. That's no answer. It is the only answer there is." The eye in the emptiness pulsed faintly. "I did what I thought necessary, what I thought best. As did they, and the ones before them, all the way back to when the first human mind brushed a tree and accidentally slipped a finger beneath the ink. I made a world in which you could be born. Now you must decide if that world is to continue." Bran thought of his brother screaming as arrows pierced him. He thought of Arya's face in the dark as she whispered the names of those she wanted dead. He thought of Jon, kneeling with a dagger in his hand and tears freezing on his lashes as the woman he loved died in his arms. "Can I undo it?" he whispered. "All of it." "That is the question," Bloodraven replied. "Can you and should you, and what will be left of you if you try?" The roots quivered, and a new image bloomed before them. Ned Stark in the Godswood of Winterfell, kneeling before the heart tree, his hands red to the wrists as snowflakes melted on his hair. He looked up, as if hearing something. His eyes met the carved face in the trunk. "Is this where you will begin?" Bloodraven asked. Bran considered. The fall from the tower had set his own path in motion, but it was his father's ride south that had broken the world he knew. If Ned had refused Robert, if he had stayed in the north. "No," Bran said. "Earlier." He thought of Lyanna, smelling of winter roses and horse sweat, laughing as she rode. He thought of her lying in a bed in a tower far from home, sheets soaked with blood. The pages turned again. The tourney at Harrenhal spread beneath them like a painted cloth. Brilliant banners snapped in the breeze. Roaring lions, flayed men, stags and krakens and flowers. The sound was an immense, joyful roar. Hoofs pounding, trumpets blaring, men cheering. Rhaegar Targaryen rode at the tilt, his armor polished to a mirror sheen, rubies blazing in the dragon wrought upon his breastplate. When he broke his final lance, the crowd erupted. Ladies stood to wave their favors. Men shouted themselves hoarse. Bran watched as Rhaegar rode past his own wife, Elia, slight and pale in the stands, her eyes shadowed with pain and devotion both. He watched as the prince's horse carried him past a dozen great ladies of the realm, any of whom might reasonably expect the crown of blue roses he held up high. He watched as the prince turned his horse toward the northern girl with the wolf's face, eyes like dusk over a snowy field. Lyanna. Time here was soft. The moment stretched as Bran reached for it. If Rhaegar crowned Elia instead, what changed? If he crowned some other lady, if he never laid the roses in Lyanna's lap, would there still be whispers? Would there still be a kidnapping, a running away, a war? What if, Bran thought, his will focusing like the point of a blade, Rhaegar did not ride there at all? He slipped into the prince. For a heartbeat, he wore Rhaegar's body like a cloak. The weight of armor pressed on his shoulders. The horse moved beneath him, each muscle's twitch familiar. His heart beat a quick, precise rhythm in his chest. He was tired, so very tired, of songs about prophecies that gnawed at the edges of his mind like rats. He could feel the path his other self had taken, the one Bran knew. The sudden, unbidden pull toward the wild northern girl, the knowledge that here was a thread that would bind together ice and fire and bring forth the promised prince. Bran slid between that impulse and the hand that held the crown. He thought of Elia's thin hands and gentle smile. He thought of the way she looked at Rhaegar when he sang, as if there were no one else in the hall. He thought of the fact that she would bear no more children without it killing her. If Rhaegar loved Lyanna, had he loved Elia less? Bran turned the horse's head. The crowd murmured, surprised. Rhaegar's path bent like a river encountering a new stone. Instead of riding toward Lyanna Stark, he guided his horse back to the royal pavilion. He slowed before the place where Elia sat, hands folded, eyes downcast. He lifted the crown of winter roses. Their pale petals trembled in the air. "My queen," he said. His voice was his own now, not Bran's. Choices, once nudged, followed their own gravity. Elia looked up, shock flaring across her face. Then she smiled, slowly, like a flower opening to the sun. The crowd cheered, bewildered and relieved and resentful all at once. Lyanna Stark laughed with her brothers. In the stands, snow in her blood and wind in her hair. She did not understand yet that a turning had been missed, that a road down which her life might have run had been blocked. Bran felt the world ripple beneath him. The pages turned of their own accord, darting forward and back as if trying to find a new balance. He glimpsed flashes. Robert Baratheon brooding over wine, his pride stung but not mortally. Lyanna riding in the Wolflands, betrothed but not stolen. Whispers of Rhaegar's fidelity, of Elia's renewed confidence, of a royal couple united before the watching realm. There was no kidnapping now, no stolen wolfmaid, no bed of blood in a lonely tower. And yet, prophecy did not so easily release its prey. Rhaegar still dreamed of a dragon with 3 heads. He still heard the pages of ancient books rustling in his sleep, saw a woman standing in a storm of ash and salt. The long winter still loomed. Bran saw, further along in that altered thread, a different war. Not Robert's rebellion, but some other uprising kindled by discontent smoldering beneath a dragon banner heavy with expectation. The North remained restive under Southern rule. The Targaryen line, pinned upon a brittle hope for song and stars, cracked along different veins. He saw that Jon Snow, who had been Jon Snow because of secret choices in that tower, would never be born that way in this world. In this world, perhaps there would be a different child, or none at all. Bran was ripped back from Rhaegar's body as if flung by a giant's hand. The Harrenhal sky shattered around him. He slammed again into the knot of roots. "Careful," Bloodraven said mildly. "You tug one thread, and all the others strain to keep time's weave from tearing. You wished to spare your aunt. You bruised the lives of thousands you did not think to look at." Bran's awareness rang like a struck bell. "It worked," he whispered. "I changed it." "Yes," the old presence said. "You did." Bran's mind scrabbled through the layers, seeking his own time, his own small, familiar sequence of events. He found it, found something like it, but it was different now, subtly, pervasively. In this world, there had been no bastard boy sent to Winterfell from the south. No dark-haired, gray-eyed child on the outside of every embrace. Ned Stark had still ridden south when a different crisis called him, and the Game of Thrones had taken its toll, but the patterns were different. Some deaths came later, others earlier. The war against the dead, when it came to a realm not yet broken by a mad queen on Dragonback, but by a different, quieter rot. And Bran Stark still fell from a tower in this rearranged history. Some events seemed as fixed as stars, only their causes shifting. He watched himself tumble over and over in 1,000 rearranged skies. He pulled back, breathless in a body that no longer quite breathed. "Is there any way," he asked hoarsely, "to make it better? Truly better? Not only different?" "That depends," Bloodraven said. On what you mean by better. Bran thought of children who never starved, of villages that never burned, of heads that never mounted spikes. He thought of the wall holding and the dead never stirring. He thought of Arya with clean hands and Sansa with unbroken dreams. A world where fewer suffer, he said, where the dead we piled up for this peace never had to die at all. And what of the ones who lived because those dead were buried where they fell? Bloodraven asked. What of the children conceived in war camps? What of the friendships forged in battle? Do you intend to spare them as well? Or will you kill them gently, by erasing the roads that led to their births? Bran shuddered. Is it better? The old voice went on. To have bled and survived and remembered, or to never have bled at all? Most men would say the former, Bran thought. But most men did not have the power to erase their own scars. I don't know, he admitted. I only know that what we have is broken. The roots creaked as the presence shifted. It is always broken, Bloodraven said. It is always in the act of breaking. That is what time is. The gods, if gods there be, mend as they can. Or break as they must. Perhaps you are a god now, Brandon. Perhaps you are only a boy with a knife, standing over a patient you do not understand. I can't do nothing, Bran said. You can, Bloodraven replied. Most have. Most will. Bran thought of all the men and women whose lives he had watched from the bark and bough, nameless and small. A farmer in the Reach who never saw a war, only lost 3 children to a fever. A washerwoman in King's Landing who died in a riot sparked by a rumor of famine. A wildling boy who froze on the wrong side of a closed gate. None of them had had a choice about any of it. He did. What if I go further back? Bran asked slowly. To the beginning. To the making of the others. If I stop that. You were made by that, Bloodraven said quietly. All you were, all you are, rests upon stones laid in that foundation. Kick it out and we will see what falls. Bran thought of Jon's shining blade, the way it burned blue-white in the night when it cut into the dead. He thought of the way the old songs had always spoken of winter as an enemy, of the way mothers frightened children with tales of others and their cold. What if, he said, there was no enemy like that, no need for a prince who was promised, no prophecy that pushed Rhaegar, no song of ice and fire at all. Then there would be other enemies, Bloodraven said, other songs. The world does not become gentle if you remove its teeth. But perhaps, Bran said, it might bite less deep. He pushed past the old voice and dove downward. The roots grew thicker, darker. They twisted around one another with such density that he almost lost all sense of direction. Up and down became meaningless. There were weirwoods here older than any castle, older than tea. He wall older than the names men called themselves. Their faces were eroded, their eyes hollowed out by time, but their memories burned bright as embers under ash. Bran fell into one of those embers. He stood, or the sense of standing, on a hill under a pale, thin sun. The air was colder, sharper. The sky seemed closer. Around him, the world was mostly trees and snow. In the hollow before him, a group of children of the forest sang in their chiming, liquid tongue. Their golden eyes reflected the dull light, and their bark-colored skin blended into the surrounding roots. In the center of their circle, a man knelt, stripped to the waist. His eyes were wild with fear and rage. His hands clawed at the frozen ground, leaving furrows. Please, he gasped in the first men's harsh language. Don't do this. The child nearest him pressed a blade of dragonglass toward his chest. We must, she whispered, or all is lost. Bran felt the ancient terror humming in this place. The first men had come with bronze swords and fire, cutting down the sacred trees as if they were brush. The children had known they would be swept aside. The song of their unbroken forests would end. So they had decided to answer with something that could not be killed by steel or fire. The blade pierced the man's skin. Bran watched the dark veins of magic spread from the wound. His eyes turned a blazing, unnatural blue. His scream became something else, a jagged ripping in the air. Frost spread outward in a circle from his knees, killing the grass. The weirwood branches overhead twisted as if in agony. Bran reached out. He did not possess the man or the child this time. He did not try to steer their bodies. Instead, he pushed into the pattern itself, the knot of choices and desperation and old, wild forces that had aligned to make this moment. 1,000 paths for the children of the forest spread before him in an instant. Paths where they fled and were hunted to extinction. Paths where they surrendered and became pets and curiosities in men's halls. Paths where they threw themselves into the sea. The path they had chosen, here, was the one where they fought back with something that walked again after death. Bran slipped alongside that choice. He placed in their minds not commands but possibilities. He breathed into their song an image, not of a weapon, but of a bargain. The children faltered. The dragonglass tip hovered above the man's heart, trembling. "There is another way," one of them whispered. It might have been the same voice that had said there was no choice. Time here was fluid. Identity trickled along its edges. "The men will never kneel," another replied. "Then we make them kneel, not in blood, in bond." Bran showed them the pact, as it had been and as it might have been stronger. He showed them men and children meeting beneath green boughs, exchanging offerings of iron and obsidian, writing their agreement into the trees themselves. He showed them a world where the sacred groves were protected by law, where the old ways bled more gently into the new. A world with a wall, but a wall raised not in panic against an unseen terror in the night, but as a boundary both sides honored. The child with the blade hesitated. "Put it down," she said finally. She drew the dragonglass back. The man sobbed, slumping, relief and confusion mingling in his broken laughter. "We will not make a monster," she said. The magic they had gathered, a raw, feral thing drawn up from the bones of the earth, had to go somewhere. Instead of sinking it into a man's chest, they wove it into the trees around them. The weirwoods drank it, their faces twisted, eyes bleeding sap. They remembered. The potential for the others became something else. A warning etched into the network, an understanding that winter could be weaponized if one were foolish enough, that the dead might walk if someone called them. Bran felt the ripple from that unmade choice spread outward. The page buckled. The wall still rose, but in a different way. Men and children built it together, a shining line under a shared sky. Stories of the white shadows became stories of what could have been, not what was. The Night's Watch became from its first day a core of stewards of the border, not penitents clinging to cold stone. Without the others, the prophecies that had tormented men like Ares and Rhaegar lost much of their teeth. There were still signs in the sky, still comets and dreams, but they pointed to smaller storms. The Game of Thrones, deprived of an apocalyptic finale, became what it had always been at its core: the squabble of ambitious men over crowns. Bran felt cold. In this new weaving, he saw Westeros tilt along different lines. The Targaryen dynasty rose and fell not on the crest of a war against death, but on the whims of politics, on famines and plagues and petty betrayals. The North remained proud and half-wild, its lords grudgingly loyal. The South seethed with schemes. Without the existential threat of the others, unity was rarer, but so was the scale of disaster. He looked for himself. The Starks still existed. The line held. There was still a Winterfell. There was still a Ned. There was still a Cat. They still had children, though the number and order shifted when he peered too closely, as if the ink were not yet settled. In some variations, there was a Brandon born who loved climbing. In others, there was no tower in King's Landing, or no queen with a twin lover to push him. In many, there was no Bran as he had been at all. He was dissolving. The deeper he pushed into changing the foundation, the more he felt his own shape blurring. He was not only rewriting the world, he was rewriting himself out of it. In the Godswood of Winterfell, that was, beneath a heart tree that remembered different things. A boy might never sit in a chair beneath its boughs, his eyes turning white as he slipped into birds. Bran clung to himself. Why? Fierce, stubborn focus. I am Bran Stark. I am the three-eyed raven. I am the Weirwood and the boy and the king. The roots shuddered. You see, Bloodraven said, somewhere in the tangle. His voice sounded more distant, as if the rewriting had pulled him further away. You are not separate from the world you would mend. You are one of its fractures. If you smooth the cracks, you smooth yourself away. Bran gritted his metaphysical teeth. Maybe that's the price, he said. Maybe it's worth paying. For whom? The old presence asked. For you? For those who will never know they've been edited? Will you erase their grief along with their joy, their mistakes with their triumphs? I can't leave it, Bran said. I can't sit on a chair and watch as we trudge forward dragging our dead. Not when I know I could have stopped some of it. He thought of Arya's thin shoulders under her cloak, the weight of every face she had worn. He thought of Sansa's poised smile, the steel behind it hammered by every indignity she had survived. He thought of Jon's haunted eyes. If he erased their wounds, he erased the people those wounds had shaped. He did not want a world without Arya's stubborn wildness, without Sansa's hard-won grace, without Jon's solemn sense of duty. Yet he also did not want a world where tens of thousands lay in shallow graves because dragons had burned a city. Maybe, he said slowly, I shouldn't erase. Not completely. What else is there? Bloodraven asked, genuinely curious now. Bran let go of the impulse to tear out entire pages. Instead, he thought of annotations, of marginalia. The Weirwoods remembered everything. They remembered battles and betrayals and broken promises. But men did not remember as trees did. They died. Their stories twisted in the telling. What one generation swore had happened, the next doubted. The North clung to some truths that the South laughed at. The maesters scraped away mentions of magic in their meticulous books. The songs polished real events into shining lies. What if men remembered more clearly? What if they could not look away from what they had done? Bran sank his awareness into the roots that threaded beneath castles and crofts, beneath septries and septs, beneath halls where lords ate meat and peasants ate what they could find. He pressed into the Weirwoods a new pattern, a gentle compulsion. Witness. When men knelt to pray beneath a heart tree, when they pressed their foreheads to its rough bark, when they whispered their secrets and their oaths, the memory would not only sink into the wood, some of it would come back. In dreams, in sudden flashes of insight, in the uneasy prickle at the back of the neck when one considered doing something cruel where a tree could see. When a lord considered breaking guest right, the image of a wedding hall slick with blood would rise in his mind. He would not know where it came from, only that it tasted of ash and horror. When a king considered burning a city, he would hear the screaming of innocents whose names he did not know. When a brother took up arms against a brother, somewhere deep inside him, he would feel the weight of 1,000 kinslayings laid at his feet. Memory as a shared burden, not a rewriting but a reweighing. In the tangle, the pattern spread like a stain. That is not what you intended, Bloodraven said, interested despite himself. You wish to remake, to begin again. Maybe. There is no beginning again, Bran said. Only beginning differently from where we are. He thought of how many times men had made the same mistakes because they had lied to themselves about what had come before. How many lordlings justified new cruelties by telling themselves the old ones had not truly been so bad. If he made forgetting harder. But you have already changed the making of the others, Bloodraven pointed out. The world you want to weigh with memory is not the same as the one you came from. I know. Bran's awareness ached, if such a thing were possible. But that change feels right. Because it spares many, Bloodraven said. Or because it spares your sister a particular wound? Both, Bran admitted. He could feel the new shape of history settling around that altered moment. Without the others, the need for dragonfire against the dead vanished. The Targaryen dragons served different purposes, or none at all if their line flickered out differently. A woman named Daenerys still might be born in some corner of that world, still might cross a sea with army and dragons, but the scale of the fire she brought would be less apocalyptic. Or perhaps she would live and die in obscurity. The possibilities multiplied. It hurt to hold them all. "Make your choice, Brandon," Bloodraven said. "Where will you stop?" Bran realized that was the heart of it. He could go on forever, adjusting, nudging, weaving, and unweaving. Each alteration would spawn fresh complexities. He could spend an eternity lost in this network, his consciousness stretched thin across 1,000 near-identical worlds, each tested for the balance of suffering and joy, each weighed and found wanting. He would cease to be Bran and become only the act of editing. He could also do nothing more. He had already changed two things: the bonding of men and children in the Age of Mist, and one decision at a tourney that spared Lyanna her bloody bed. The world would grow from that different seed. But he could sense, in the way the roots hummed, that the new world would still not be simple. There would still be wars. There would still be betrayals. There would still be tyrants who never walked beneath trees. Memory alone would not prevent all cruelty. He thought of Arya walking in a land where the dead had never risen, with no Night King to kill. Would she still become someone who knew how to put a dagger in the dark? Would she still need to? He thought of Jon in a world where his bloodline was as straightforwardly Stark or some other muddle entirely. Would he still feel torn between honor and love? Would he still be needed at any wall? He could not answer. The roots stirred, impatient. "Little leaf," the forest whispered. "Choose." Bran gathered himself. He would do one more thing. He traced the Stark line through the roots, following it forward. He watched the castle of Winterfell rise and fall in countless versions. Burned by dragons, held against them. Taken by Boltons, taken by no one. Betrayed from within, betrayed from without. He watched the faces of his ancestors, all the Brandons and Eddards and Creggans and Rickards, flare and fade like candle flames. He found himself, or something like him, as a knot in that line. In some iterations, he did not exist. In others, he did but never fell. In a few, he fell but rose in different ways. He reached for one. In that thread, there was a Bran Stark born the third son of Eddard, a boy who loved climbing and stories of knights. He fell from a tower. He did not die. He did not walk again. He still went north, dragged in a cart behind a giant of a man and a wildling woman with burned ears, chasing after three-eyed dreams. He became what he had become. That version of himself had now become, in the new weave, a rarity. A narrow path amid many where he still existed to sit beneath a heart tree and do the thing he was doing now. Most worlds spun on without him. Bran anchored himself to that thread. He looped around it like a vine around a stake, feeding into it the pattern he had laid into the Weirwood net, the compulsion to remember, to witness. He strengthened it around his own people, around his blood. The Starks would feel, in this new history, a deeper pull toward honesty, toward facing truths however ugly. Not always. They were human, but more often. It was not much, but it was something. He let go of all the other threads. The effect was instantaneous and infinitely slow. The universe seemed to inhale. The roots tightened, then relaxed. Moments shifted, resettled. In the godswood of a world that had never birthed ice demons from a man's ruined chest, a boy sat beneath a heart tree. In the capital of a kingdom that had never burned an entire city to ash to stop an army of corpses, a queen listened uneasily to rumors from the north. In the dungeons of a castle by the sea, a broken man came awake screaming from a dream of chains and fire, with the sudden, blinding understanding that the thing he had almost done years ago would have stained the rest of his life. The Red Wedding, that particular infamy, did not happen in this new weaving. The Weirwoods had whispered too loudly to too many involved. There were other betrayals, other feasts gone sour, but not that one. The Mad King still died. Some tyrants cannot be whispered away. Dragons still hatched from stone, their wings casting shadows over far-off cities. But the path each took was nudged, slightly, by moments when a heart tree's face loomed in a dream and made a man hesitate before lighting the match. The others did not march. Winter was still cruel, but it was a season, not an apocalypse. The Wall was a place of cold honor, not desperate last stands. Bran felt all of this settle with a deep, resonant thrum. He realized he was hurting, not in his legs or his back, but in some more essential place. In giving up the urge to perfect everything, he had accepted that he could only do so much. That acceptance felt like grief. He sensed, dimly, that the world he had left behind, the one where the dead had risen, where Arya had killed a night king, where Dany had burned a city, where he had been crowned upon a throne of men's fears, was receding. It was not precisely being erased. It was over, an iteration completed, a story that had been told. This new world, this newly woven Westeros, lay before him like a blank page with faint, ghostly lines from the previous text showing through when held up to the light. "You have done as well as any," Bloodraven's voice said softly. It sounded smaller now, less like a great tree and more like a man. "Better than some." "Will they know?" Bran whispered. "Any of them?" "No," the old presence considered. "Not in the way you mean. They will feel. They will dream. A Stark will sometimes wake with tears on his face and not know they are for a brother who bled out at a wedding that never happened. A queen will stand on a balcony and shiver at the thought of fire and ash and the taste of bells on her tongue. A girl will look west and think, for no reason she can name, that she should go where the maps end." Bran's heart clenched. "So they will be haunted by things they never lived." "We are all haunted by things," Bloodraven said. "Some by our own pasts, some by our parents, some by our people's. They will be haunted by possibilities. That too is part of what you have chosen. A people with a deeper sense of what might have been may be less eager to cast themselves into cataclysm. Or more. We shall see." The roots around Bran loosened, as if the tree were exhaling. "Can I go back?" he whispered. "To myself. To wherever I am now." "You are where you are," Bloodraven said, which was no answer at all. The darkness under the roots brightened. The heart tree's face swam toward him, its eyes twin pools of blood-red sap. Bran fell upward again. Snowflakes brushed his cheeks. The smell of pine and cold iron filled his nose. Wood creaked in the wind, and somewhere a raven croaked. He shivered. His eyes opened. He sat in his chair beneath the heart tree in Winterfell's Godswood. The pool before him reflected his face, thinner and paler than he remembered. Dark hair shot through with streaks of white at the temples. He looked older than he should. He breathed. His breath steamed in the cold air. That small miracle astonished him. Voices drifted through the trees. "Told you he spends too much time out here. It's not natural. He's a Stark. The Godswood is where they belong. And the council? The lords ministering? The treasury? You think Godswood roots keep track of coin?" Bran turned his head. Two figures stood at the edge of the clearing. One was tall and willow-slim, wrapped in a dark cloak trimmed with white fur, red hair like a fall of copper down her back. The other leaned like a shadow at her shoulder, shorter, wiry, a sword at her hip and a dagger somewhere else that few ever saw until it was too late. "Sansa," Bran said. "Arya." His sisters looked older too, the years written in careful lines around their eyes and in the set of their mouths, but they were unmistakable. Sansa stepped forward. Arya hung back, watching. "You were gone," Sansa said. Her voice wavered. "For 3 days," they said. "For, not just warging into birds or whatever you call it. Gone. Like your skin was an empty house." Bran's tongue felt thick. "How long since?" He groped for an anchor. "Since the long night. Since King's Landing. Since his coronation." Sansa misunderstood. "Since session?" she asked. "You left them arguing about rebuilding Moat Cailin and how much the crown should pay. They are still arguing. I left them to it." Bran let out a slow breath. "What is it you do, Bran?" Arya asked quietly. He looked at her. Of all of them, she had changed the most and the least. There was something in her eyes now that had not been there when she had been a girl making faces at Septa Mordane. Something sharp and distant, yet beneath it the same wild heartbeat. "I remember," he said. Arya snorted. "You always did that. Remembered things no one else wanted to." "Not like this," Sansa said, studying him. "You're different." She frowned as she said it, then shook her head, as if chasing away a fly. Different? She repeated softer, confused. No, that's not how I meant to say it. Bran watched her. The Weirwood network hummed at the edges of his awareness. A constant, quiet presence now, like a heartbeat. It was less overwhelming than it had been beneath the roots. It existed alongside his own senses rather than swallowing them. Yet he could still feel its new pattern. Already it worked. Sansa looked at him and felt, faintly, the weight of choices she might have made in another life. To stay with Joffrey, to leap from a broken tower, to hold a hand that would have dragged her down. Arya scratched her ear and frowned, as if trying to remember a list she had once recited every night. Names slipped like fish from her grasp. You were a better king, Sansa said. When you spoke to us, now you speak more to the trees. Bran almost laughed. I am not sure I am a king at all anymore, he said. What are you then? Arya asked. He let his gaze travel up the heart tree's trunk, along its carved, sorrowful face. An editor, he said. They stared at him. Did you change something? Sansa asked slowly. I had the oddest feeling this morning, looking at the ravens, as if there had been more of them once. More black wings in the sky. Bran hesitated. He had thought they would not know. Bloodraven had said they would only feel, only dream. But his sisters were Starks. The pattern he had woven into his blood tugged a little harder here. Do you remember the others? He asked quietly. Sansa blinked. The who? Arya frowned. Old stories. Ghosts and ice demons. Nan's tales. Bran searched their faces. There was no echo in their eyes of the long nights on the wall, of battles fought in blizzards. No frostbitten memories. Only the vague, distant fear that children held for monsters under the bed. Good, he thought. Good. Do you remember the bells? He asked Sansa. She stared at him, and for a moment her face paled. Her eyes slid sideways, as if watching something he could not see. Bells, she murmured. Ringing, and she swallowed. That was a dream, she said sharply. A silly thing. You had them too. Arya's hand flexed around the hilt of her unseen knife. I dreamed of a man with blue eyes, she said slowly, standing in the Godswood, and I had a dagger and... She broke off, shaking her head. I don't know. Felt real. But it wasn't. Some dreams, Bran said, are memories that never had a chance to be real. Stop talking like a bloody maester, Arya snapped. If something's wrong, say it. Bran looked down at his hands. I opened a door, he said. I walked through it. Things behind me changed. Changed how? Sansa demanded. Are we in danger? Is the North? We are always in danger, Bran said. That has not changed. He closed his eyes briefly. I tried, he said, to make it so we wouldn't have to do some of the things we did, so that some of the people who died lived. Silence settled over the Godswood. And did you? Arya asked. In some worlds, Bran whispered. Yes, in some I killed them before they were born. In others I broke their lives in different ways. There is no way to save everyone. There is only choosing which wounds the world will bear. Who gave you the right to choose? Sansa's voice was tight as a bowstring. Bran met her eyes. No one, he said. But I had the power. That alone. He trailed off. Somewhere far away, a raven took flight from a tower, its black wings beating the air. Through its eyes, he saw snow on the wall and men in black cloaks laughing around a fire. Not desperate now, but content with their cold duty. The wall had never been the last line against an ancient terror. It was simply a boundary. No one had yet thought to test it with an army. He could have left it that way. He had left it that way. Well, Arya said eventually, you always were an annoying little know-it-all. He blinked. She grinned suddenly, wolfish and bright, and punched his shoulder gently. If you've gone and rearranged the whole bloody world, the least you can do is not mope about it, she said. You're still my BR. Other, aren't you?" "I think so," Bran said. "Then that's that," Arya declared. "There were probably 100 ways things could have gone worse. Maybe a few where they went better. We got this one. I'm not going to waste the time I have wishing for other stories." She shrugged. "I've done enough of that." Sansa's gaze lingered on Bran's face. "You've changed more than you're telling us," she said softly. "Yes. Will you change more?" He looked up at the heart tree. "No," he said. It was the hardest promise he had ever made. The temptation was still there, a sweet, poisonous fruit hanging just within reach. Every time he learned of some cruelty, some pointless death, he could feel the door stir. He could, with a thought, go back and whisper into some bastard's ear, convince him to take a different road, to sheathe a sword instead of drawing it. But he knew now that each whisper pulled another thread somewhere else. He had made enough edits. The page would tear if he kept scratching at it. "What will you do then?" Sansa asked. There was a queen in her now, not only a sister. She asked as a ruler who must know the tools at her disposal, including a brother who could speak to trees. "I will remember," Bran said. "And I will make sure we remember. Truly. Not just the parts that make good songs." He gestured vaguely toward the south. "Tell the maesters to copy more than dates and names. Tell them to write down what the small folk say happened, not only what lords claim. Build more weirwood groves if you can bear it. Plant trees in the yards of castles that never had them. Let men and women have someplace to go when they need to confess." Sansa's eyebrows rose. "You want me to plant spies for you," she said. "Trees that listen. Trees that witness," Bran corrected. "I don't need to listen if those beneath them listen to themselves." Arya snorted. "You've gotten stranger." "Strangeness might be what we need," Sansa murmured. She looked up at the bleak northern sky. "When I was in the south," she said quietly, "I heard a story that the maesters tell. They say history is a wheel, the same patterns over and over. They say men like Aegon and Robert and Joffrey are inevitable, and the rest of us are only spokes on their wheel." She shook her head. "I do not like wheels." "No," Arya said. "We like swords." They exchanged a brief, fierce grin. Bran reached out with his mind. The Weirwood network answered. He touched a grove near Old Town and felt the weight of the citadel pressing close, the minds of maesters buzzing like diligent bees. He brushed past them, planting a seed of unease in the hearts of a few younger, more curious men. A sense that ignoring magic, ignoring the old gods and their trees, was not wisdom but blindness. He touched a single sapling in a tiny village far in the Riverlands, where a farmer's daughter sat with her back against its slender trunk, crying into her hands because her father had sold her to a man twice her age. The tree drank her tears. Bran let a vision bloom in her mind. Herself, years hence, standing in the same place with a child on her hip and a garden growing behind her, alive and unbroken. Sometimes, knowing that survival was possible was enough to keep someone from giving up. He touched the faint, stubborn memory of dragons in the roots near Dragonstone, where storms lashed black stone cliffs. The line of the dragon lords had not ended in this world, but it had bent. In some iterations, a silver-haired girl still walked along a shingle beach, picking up shells. He wrapped her in a whisper of forests and wolves, a reminder that she was part of a larger story than herself. He would not steer her. He would not burn cities for her. But he would let her feel the weight of what he had felt beneath the roots when he had almost unmade the world. He touched the wall and felt it solid and strong, not yet tested. He touched the sea and felt ships plow its waves, some bearing ironborn raiders who thought themselves kings of the narrow sea. He touched as much as he dared, lightly, like a man turning pages in a book he did not wish to damage. "What are you doing now?" Arya asked, watching his unfocused eyes. "Reading," Bran said. "And underlining." Sansa rolled her eyes. "Come to the hall," she said. "If you are going to underline our lives, you might at least act like you are part of them." He thought of saying no, of remaining beneath the tree forever, half in and half out of the world, the way Bloodraven had. of letting his body wither while his mind stretched across roots and centuries. He thought of that deep, lonely cold. He looked at his sisters. "I'll come," he said. Arya let out a breath he had not realized she had been holding. "Good," she said. "You can tell Lord Umber that if he keeps trying to cheat the crown on timber prices, we'll plant a tree in his solar and have it stare at him whenever he sleeps." Bran smiled. It was small and slow, but it was his. Sansa stepped behind his chair and took hold of the handles. "Ready, Your Grace?" she asked, a hint of teasing in the formality. "Yes," Bran said. As she pushed him across the snow, away from the heart tree and towards the hall where men argued over stone and grain, he let his mind trail behind, brushing once more against the Weirwood's roots. In the deep places, shadows of all the might-have-beens still lingered. He could feel them sometimes, as a pressure behind his eyes. Jon standing on a field of snow with a dragon at his back, Arya sliding a dagger into the heart of a creature of ice, Dany crying as bells rang and flames rose. They were echoes from a story that had been told and set aside. He would carry those echoes. He would carry the knowledge that there had been a cost to the world's new shape, that ghosts walked in its unseen corners. Perhaps that was what it meant to be a god of memory. Not to erase, but to remember what others could not bear to. Remember, and to lean gently on the shoulders of those who might repeat the worst of it. As they reached the Godswood's edge, a raven flapped down to land on a branch overhead. It cocked its head and regarded Bran with one bright black eye. He looked up at it. "Tell them," he said softly, knowing the bird would carry the impulse through the net, through rustling leaves and whispering bark. "Tell them all, what we were, what we did, what we might yet do." The raven croaked. It took wing, flying toward the wall, toward Old Town, toward King's Landing, toward 1,000 nameless trees in 1,000 tiny villages where men and women would one day find themselves hesitating before an unkindness and not know why. Bran Stark, who sat a king beneath the boughs of the old gods and had once opened the Weirwood network and rewritten Westeros' entire history, closed his eyes for a heartbeat. When he opened them again, it was to a hall full of bickering lords, a table covered in maps, and his sisters at his side. The heart tree watched from the Godswood and remembered.